Good evening. I'd like to welcome everybody to the February 10th River Falls City Council meeting. First thing we'll do is stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we get a roll call, please, Amy.
Bierstead,
Here.
Bjork,
Here.
Caro,
Here.
Downing,
Here.
Morissette,
Here.
Odine,
Here.
Page.
Here. Okay, and that goes approval of the minutes from the January 27th meeting.
I move approval.
Second. First and second, questions, comments on the minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Next, we have approval of the bills with Councilmember Bierstead.
Mayor and council, I move to approve payment of bills in the amount of $2,634,708.11, subject to the comptroller.
Second.
First and second on the bills. Any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Before I get started in public comments, I think I just want to read something real quick I put together. I want to briefly acknowledge all the questions and concern raised by council members and community members regarding immigration enforcement in the city of River Falls. I want to reiterate what has already been stated publicly by our police chief and city administrator. The River Falls Police Department is not an immigration enforcement agency. The River Falls Police Department does not participate in the federal 287G program, and our offices are not focused on civil immigration violations. I also want to be very clear on this point. Any community member who may continue to call 911 if they feel unsafe or threatened. The chief and I have been in regular communication and will continue to do so. Council will also receive a written communication later this week addressing the questions that have been raised. We recognize that council members and residents have been asked detailed and thoughtful questions. While the police chief is not available for tonight's meeting, he will be present at the upcoming Ask the City session to engage directly with residents. And that session will be next Tuesday night at 6:30 right here in this office. In moments of uneasiness, my responsibility is to lead with steadiness. The police chief has demonstrated that same steadiness by leading the department that follows the law, adheres to adopted policy, and is committed to serving all members of our community. And thank you. I just wanted to point that out for everybody once again. Okay, next we move on to public comments. As always, everybody will have 2 minutes. Come on up, sign in, and we will start. Whoever wants to come up first.
Hello, Austin Mahanke, 907 West Cedar Street. I'm just coming up to introduce myself again. I am running for alderperson at large this year in April, and just wanted to give people the opportunity to get to know my name and who I am. I can be reached at any time at 715-821-5743. Thank you.
Thanks.
Good evening, Dana Linscott. Here's a private citizen. Last week, it's unfortunate the chief is not here. Last week, I attempted to contact the chief about what appeared to be officer misconduct. I contacted him as a courtesy because I've worked with law enforcement before, and it's usually best if things can be handled internally. Unfortunately, the chief would not meet with me. The deputy chief could not be found, and although I was told the chief would call me back when he had a chance, no call resulted from that meeting. I was not the only person there about that same alleged misconduct. Part of public safety is public relations, and the chief has been quite clear that although he'd like to engage in more public relations, he doesn't feel free to because the mayor does not appreciate that. I respect the chief. I think he could be a really good chief of police for River Falls. But he answers to his boss, and when restrictions or unofficial policies are placed on him, he's not free to be as good as he possibly could. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, we'll move on to, we'll have a public hearing. I'll close the council hearing and open up a public hearing. This will be on ordinance 226-01, excuse me, an ordinance amending Title 17 zoning, Chapter 17.04 and 17.08. This is for accessory dwelling units. Next one is ordinance 2026-02. This is an ordinance amending Title 17 zoning, Chapter 17.04, 17.08, 17.20, 17.24, 17.28, 17.64, and 17.73. This is multifamily spatial standards, amenity, and open space. Next one is ordinance 2026-03. This is an ordinance amending Title 17 zoning, Chapter 17.04, 17.08, 17.20, 17.24, 17.28, and 17.104 code clarification. Next one is ordinance 2026-04. This is an ordinance amending Title 17 zoning, Chapter 17.08.020 for a driveway width. Next one is ordinance 2026-05. This is an ordinance amending Title 17 zoning, Chapter 17.20, 17.24, 17.28, 17.44, 17.48, and 17.80. This is single-family, multifamily, and industrial parking standards. And the next one is ordinance 2026-06. This is an ordinance amending Title 17 zoning, Chapter 17.04 and 17.08. And this is for shade structures. And if we want, first we can have Harley give us a presentation, and if anybody in the audience has any questions, that'd be time. So go ahead, Harley.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. I'm Harley Milhorn, Senior Planner. These proposed amendments represent the first phase in the effort to implement the housing policy vision of the 2023 Comprehensive Plan. These amendments were put before the Plan Commission at workshop in December of 2025 and then heard at the 2026 Plan Commission meeting, with the Plan Commission forwarding the proposed amendments unanimously with a recommendation of approval. This evening, I'll begin by reviewing the comp plan guidance that undergirds this effort, go over the data and analysis that provided a foundation for the recommendations, and then dive into the proposed ordinance amendments. I will pause after each section to see if I can address any questions or take any feedback. As a reminder, the comp plan has an implementation chapter and a section for each of the major elements of the comp plan. For the purpose of these ordinance amendments, we are focusing on items from the housing and land use elements. The first item we have selected is to update the zoning code to support the land use categories of the land use chapter, specifically with regard to residential development standards. The two housing items that we have selected align with the land use item. One is to update the zoning ordinance to support density and development that accommodates the missing middle housing typology, that being townhomes, duplexes, and triplexes. And another is to consider the adoption of alternative housing options, such as accessory dwelling units, otherwise known as ADUs. As we work on implementing the comp plan, this is a helpful diagram to understand how policies and regulations stack. At the lower level, there is the most flexibility in defining and creating policies. After that, policies and process become more defined with less discretion and more certainty. At the top of the diagram are permits and processes that have the least discretion and are the most specific as to requirements. At the bottom, policy is being created and is driven by community goals. Working upward, policy is being implemented and applied through regulations. At the top are permits that are reviewed for compliance with policy and regulation and are issued administratively if they meet all requirements. Another essential item in implementing community goals is the partnership with the private sector, builders and developers, businesses and employers, and also residents. Few cities actually build projects, so development typically occurs as a partnership between a community and developers or builders. In order for a development project to be successful, it needs to be feasible in these 5 areas. Financially feasible means that the project can be financed effectively. Market feasibility is tied to that there's a need in the market that the project could reasonably accommodate. The site also has to have appropriate physical characteristics to support the use. The project must also be legally feasible and meet the community's regulatory and policy goals. And finally, the project needs to be politically feasible and have the support of the community and elected representatives. One of the main jobs of a developer is to manage risk. Each of these elements have a different component of risk. Wherever there can be more certainty, there can be a lower level of risk, typically a more feasible and potentially affordable project. To begin to formulate an approach towards achieving the goals as laid out by the comp plan, we began by collecting data. We collected data on our existing neighborhoods and their conformance to the size standards of code. We looked at the location of our existing missing middle housing typology, including the location and number of units. We reviewed the development standards for recent developments, the majority of which were approved via the planned unit development process, which provided flexibility from the underlying zoning standards. Also key to this is our tracking based on the housing needs analysis, which was initially conducted in 2018, updated in 2022, and will be updated again this year. When looking at lot size standards, we started with the R1 single-family low-density residence district, which is shown in light yellow on the zoning map. One of the interesting things we discovered is the average R1 single-family lot size is 11,500 square feet, and that the average R1 duplex lot size is only slightly larger at about 13,000 square feet, double the units on roughly the same area. There were not many existing single-family lots in R1 that were not conforming as to size. We also looked at the number of houses in a neighborhood to see what our existing net density is in the city. This diagram shows that even though most single-family homes are on lots of at least 7,500 square feet, looking at the number of homes in a neighborhood, we see that very few areas with single-family homes are under 3 dwelling units per acre. Most are between 3 and 12 dwelling units per acre. Areas with lower residential densities typically contain unbuildable areas on the lot, such as steep slopes or floodplains. The lighter color shows places where there are under 3 dwelling units per acre, and then goes up from there 3 to 6, 6 to 12, 12 to 18, and 18 plus for the darkest red color. The higher densities are partially due to a mix of housing types in our existing neighborhoods. Code currently allows for duplexes in R1 provided they have a 1,400-foot separation from each other, or are in larger developments not to exceed 2 acres. The existing stock of duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes in R1 illustrates that these provisions have not been adhered to in the oldest and most established parts of our community. The average separation between duplexes across the city in R1 is only 158 feet, far less than the existing code requirement. The existing stock of missing middle housing blends well into the streetscape and does not generate a higher level of complaints regarding traffic or other density factors as compared to traditional single-family only areas. The natural development of the city lended itself towards integrated mixed housing densities and provides a template of how we may structure the ordinance going forward to continue this development pattern. This diagram converts the densities of duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes into a heat map, where clear patterns regarding clustering begin to appear. There are generally 2 major clusters of R1 missing middle housing, one proximal to City Hall, both north and south of Division, and the other between Division and Cascade on the east side of Main. Again, these are just areas zoned R1. Areas where duplexes are permitted in R2 and R3 or by PUD are not shown on this map. This is meant to illustrate that even areas of traditional single-family neighborhoods, other types of housing have historically been well integrated. Here are a few photos of what we mean by missing middle. These are all 4-unit buildings located in existing R1 neighborhoods. Some have been converted from single-family homes or added onto, while others were purpose-built for multifamily. Turning from older neighborhoods to more recent developments, flexibility regarding lot size, lot width, and setbacks has been requested and granted via PUD for these neighborhoods in the city over time. In each of these neighborhood developments, the determination was made that the project met the goals of the community, the general intent of the ordinances, and was in alignment with the comp plan. However, flexibility was requested in order to make the neighborhood feasible. Similar flexibility regarding parking, setbacks, and particularly open space has been requested and granted via PUD for 11 multifamily projects in the last 6 years. In each of these, the determination was also made that the project met the goals of the community, the general intent of the ordinance, and was in alignment with the comp plan. And flexibility was needed for each project. I also want to note that flexibility has also been granted specifically to meet the housing needs in the community. The city has been tracking progress towards meeting the housing needs identified in the 2018 and 2022 housing studies. An additional 313 multifamily for-rent units are needed by 2030. An additional 258 single-family and 81 twin-home units are needed by 2030 as well. Further, 693 senior housing units are anticipated to be needed, and some of these may be provided in the new single, two, or multifamily neighborhoods. The planned unit development is helpful for providing flexibility, but it also creates uncertainty for the developer and the community and lengthens the approval process. In analyzing the flexibility that the city has historically granted via the PUD over time, we have identified areas where the same types of flexibility have been granted multiple times. Essentially, each of these approvals has set a new zoning standard, thereby creating policy, back to the very bottom of the zoning pyramid. The proposed ordinance amendments are intended to move the approvals up the pyramid where there is more certainty and specificity and less discretion, meaning less risk. Expectations and outcomes are known by both the community and the developer. Another impetus for codifying these is to ensure that we are treating proposals equally and not arbitrarily approving some developments but not others that are substantially similar, preserving constitutional rights of equal treatment and due process. So the key takeaways from our data collection are that lot size, setbacks, and housing types are areas where our ordinance is out of alignment with our comprehensive plan, as well as the current development feasibility and market trends. We also found that scaling lot size differently across housing types in our R1, R2, and R3 districts would be consistent with the existing missing middle development patterns and may provide additional opportunities for more of this type of housing development in new and existing neighborhoods. We have concluded that amending the ordinance based on this data and policy decisions that have already been made aligns with the comp plan implementation goals and can make the development process more certain for both the community, landowners, and development partners, which may also make development more financially feasible towards meeting housing affordability goals. Is there any questions or observations on the data analysis before I move on to the proposed ordinances?
Go ahead, we'll come back to questions when you're all done.
Thank you. Yep. All right then. In this next section, I'll go directly into proposed residential ordinance amendments and then wrap up with some other amendments that staff is recommending based on issues that have been popping up over time. Here are 3 of the main areas of residential ordinance amendments. I'll dive into these in more detail, though in the packet there is a copy of each draft ordinance. There is also a chart that provides an overview of the changes to the residential standards, so you can see in one place what is staying the same and what is recommended for change. The 3 main categories of residential code amendments are ADUs, accessory dwelling units, lot performance standards, and multifamily performance standards. Here are the main elements of the accessory dwelling unit ordinance. We have researched other city codes as well as to best practices that have been identified to remove barriers to building this type of housing while balancing the integration of these homes into neighborhoods. These standards are meant to ensure that the accessory dwelling units are truly accessory to the main use of the property. Most of these types of units are either built as freestanding structures in the rear yard or as separate housing units in the principal structure. ADUs are not intended to be the housing affordability silver bullet, but rather a niche tool to allow for more flexibility, such as solutions for age-in-place or multi-generational housing. Where these have been implemented, even in much larger communities, very few in proportion have actually been constructed. Any thoughts or questions on ADUs? On to the changes for other residential housing. One key item is how we measure setbacks, as this is something that that has come up more frequently in our neighborhoods. We are proposing that setbacks be measured from the property line to the building foundation, rather than the overhang or eave. We are also proposing that for some types of housing in some zoning districts, we step away from the minimum lot size or area per unit and instead use a density standard on the number of homes per acre. This will provide flexibility in lot and unit configuration, while essentially achieving the same goal as the minimum lot size or lot area, but emphasizes form, function, and impact over rigid standards. For the R1 district, there are three main changes. The minimum lot size is proposed to be reduced from 7,500 to 5,500 square feet. Two-family homes would be allowed without a separation requirement, and the density standard reflects the minimum lot size. And triplexes are to be allowed on lots of at least 10,000 square feet in area to allow for the existing missing middle housing that already exists today in these neighborhoods. For R2 medium density residential, we begin scaling single family lot sizes to allow for more homes in a zoning district that is intended to have more density. Setbacks are also modified to reflect flexibility that has been requested and granted in other neighborhoods in the city, specifically via PUD. Proposed are also modest changes to the mobile home park zoning district, standards to bring them into alignment with the R2 district, as areas zoned MHP mobile home park are also guided as medium density residential within the comp plan. The R3 district keeps the single family lot scale from R2, does not have an upper limit on the number of two or multifamily units, but rather will be determined by setbacks, parking, stormwater, and other site conditions, and makes the same setback changes for single, two, and multifamily homes as is proposed in R2. This allows for more housing in areas where water, sewer, and roadway infrastructure can support more residents. Any questions or thoughts on anything thus far? Here is where there is a very significant change proposed for multifamily homes within the city of River Falls. The amenity and open space standards. This is an area that, due to the current requirement, that being 1 square foot of usable open space be provided for each square foot of dwelling area, has required a PUD process for almost all of our recent multifamily projects. We looked at what amenities were provided in those planned unit developments and created a menu of options that a project could provide. The number of those required for each project is based on the number of units proposed. More units, more amenities. But the developer could still pick and choose which are provided. We're also proposing that we retain the 1-to-1 open space standard, but as an option, not a requirement for all projects. If undeveloped open space is provided at a ratio of 1-to-2, meaning 1/2 square foot for each foot of livable, half of the required amenities would be needed. We're proposing that projects that provide more affordable housing units also receive a credit or reduction in required amenities. Lastly, knowing that some of these multifamily projects may be redevelopment or infill sites within the city with site constraints, we are also proposing that proximity and connection to existing public open space and amenities be recognized. The final residential ordinance amendment proposed is for multifamily parking, another area that has requested and received flexibility. Here we are trying to right-size parking requirements based on existing projects in the city, standards that other communities use, and thinking about locations that may have available on-street parking for visitors versus those that need to provide some off-street parking for guests. The existing code requires 2 spaces per unit regardless of bedroom count. This proposal changes it to a per unit split. Finally, a few other items have popped up over time that don't fall cleanly into a single code category, but serve to make administration of code simpler and less interpretive. To start, a broad refinement of definitions is proposed, as well as clarifying the category of shade structures. With the increase in prevalence of 3-car garages versus 2-car garages, and in an effort to avoid the awkward no man's land of unpaved or turfed areas that get driven over, the maximum driveway width in the right-of-way line is also proposed herein to increase from 25 to 35 feet. And I'll have a graphic later that shows that because it can be hard to imagine. We're proposing a separate definition for an accessory building and an accessory use for more clarity. Similarly, for attached dwelling units and principal buildings. Issues have arisen around shade structures such as pergolas, gazebos, and ramadas. The code currently does not differentiate between open-sided and enclosed accessory structures, but they are different from a building and fire code perspective, so we're bringing them into alignment for our zoning code. Our current ordinance limits driveway widths to 25 feet at the right-of-way or property line. This measurement is taken directly at that line and does not apply even 6 inches in thereafter with no tapering requirements. Where we have homes with 3-car garages, there have been erosion issues with people trying to maneuver into the 3rd stall. And we have many instances where people have widened their driveway without a permit, and the wider driveway has not thus created any issues. This is an example of the type of paving pattern that has become more prevalent, a wide apron with a relatively small front yard setback that leads to a 3rd garage, often leading to an unpaved snippet just to maintain the technical code compliance right at that property line. However, this triangle is often driven over and can result in debris being tracked onto the driveway and ultimately into the right-of-way. The proposal for this increase is intended to eliminate these edge case scenarios. Finally, a few more very small changes are proposed. For the final handful of proposed changes, we are clarifying that residential buildings, particularly single and 2-family homes, must have at least one front door facing the street. We don't have an expiration for site plan review currently, and that being administrative site plan review, which is an oversight where other approvals have a time limit. Thus, we are proposing to add a deadline. We also regulate window signs in our downtown area and may in the future regulate them outside of it, but we do not currently have a definition, so that is proposed herein as well. Finally, at the workshop, the Commission discussed that and recommended using the parking standards that we have in our corporate park zoning district and applying those to I-1 and I-2. This removes the minimum parking requirement outright, but adding other performance standards such as parking lot orientation, vegetation, and surfacing. So we've added language to do so. With that, that does conclude my presentation. Thank you for your time, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Aaron. Okay, since we're in a public hearing, is there anybody in the audience has anything like to say about this? Okay, we'll close the public hearing and open up the council hearing, and we'll open up for questions.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question. Under amenities, you discussed having the developer pick them out. Is there a reason why you didn't suggest the Plan Commission working with the Park Board to some extent?
I'm sorry, Councilmember, could you repeat the last part of your question? I caught everything else.
You talked about amenities and open space alternatives. Is there a reason why you suggested the developer pick them out instead of the Plan Commission or the Park Board working together?
Thank you, Councilmember. That's a good question. It really comes down to development timing. By the time we hit the Plan Commission, really 85% of the design and due diligence is done by part of the developer. And also typically developers like to come with different amenity packages that they typically like to provide in their communities. What this is doing is ensuring that whatever is provided is either at the quality level of the list or on the list. And if there is a disagreement as well, we do have a process in our code to address that. And this also does not preclude the commission from requiring more if it does need to go through a PUD process.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I just had a thought. In fact, Harley was kind enough to meet with me a little bit yesterday to talk about it. The ADU topic caught my attention, and I just want to express a little bit of concern about them. Not that I'm against them. They're a wonderful idea for family or other, close friends to stay with a family. My concern is more long-term. So let's say we build an ADU in the backyard for grandma, and she's around for 5 years, and then all of a sudden she's gone. Now what happens to that structure? And my concern is, and I think the reason that a lot of communities have not allowed ADUs over the years is that they turn into rental property. So I'm just tossing that out there, something to think about. And of course, we can regulate the rules for that, but then that means staff or somebody else has to monitor this. So just one of those things that, and I've run into folks that have wanted to talk or wanted to build ADUs, and you're basically building a small home. And he already said they're expensive. We're not going to see many of them in River Falls.
I don't think so. Mr. Mayor, I've got some topics, and similar to Mr. Bierstead, I had a good conversation with Harley this morning regarding some of the topics I sent over in an email to him. I'm happy to see that the candidates for council and mayor are in the audience. This is an impactful change that will take some getting up to speed on. But it's very impactful to how the city operates with regard to development. So I'd urge you to really look into it. I've been griping about PUDs and the overuse, in my opinion, for years. I'm glad to see this is finally happening. You look at the list of the things, parking is mainly one of them. Some of the setbacks are there as well. I'm a firm believer that if we're changing our own ordinances or guidelines or rules, we don't really have them. So this changes and lines that up. And the use of the PUD is still an effective tool. Don't get me wrong. We will see PUD use in the future, and that's fine, but I think we've seen it just too excessively up till now. ADUs, Mr. Bierstead has some good points with it becoming a rental. I had the conversation with Harley this morning about my struggle between property owners' rights and notifications to neighbors. So, part of me where I'm coming down is probably on the property owner's rights side, where they can do what they want with their property within guidelines, within reason. The neighbor notifications, I hope that we don't have crappy neighbors, and the first time a neighbor hears about it is when the cement truck comes pour the foundation. So hopefully that neighborhood communication happens, but that was a concern that I have. We talked also about the missing middle and the use of how these can impact the character of neighborhoods. I think Harley showed some great examples of places where those are in place, they work. But again, I think everything in moderation. I think that's a good answer. I do have concerns over the density. I have concerns over the density for public works and public safety, and I know both of those departments are those departments in public safety and those public works get a kick at the cat every time these come around, and I do know that staff works well with each other. My concern over density is probably the biggest one. My time on the council is coming to an end in April. I won't be here probably for the next big subdivision. Maybe I will, I don't know. But it's going to be up to those on the council after April. But if we look at market trends over the years, I think back to I don't even know if it was mid-50s, 60s, and 70s when everybody was pushing houses up to the front of the lot so they could have these big backyards. And that was a great trend until we come up to places like College View where we want to put in a sidewalk. And now we've got too tight of an area to put a sidewalk in. I don't know what those trends are going to become. Right now our trends are smaller lots, people who don't want a whole bunch of big yard. I don't know that trend will be the same. I don't know what the trend will be. I don't think any of us do.
And my point is I just think we need to retain some flexibility. We've got a couple of subdivisions, one out by the high school, Oak Hill, the one we approved on Powell, that have got some reduced lot sizes. And I think, again, in moderation, those are fine. But again, I think we constantly in our housing study look at those things, but we need a blend even in those R1 categories where we have, you know, gradation between different lot sizes and different things. I live in a neighborhood that has 90-foot lots, and those are small, I think. But again, I'm not going to win that battle. So I know that that's the trend today. I'm just saying we need to retain that flexibility, because down the road, councils after us are going to have to deal with whatever the next trend is. And I don't want to see areas that become unattractive to buyers and they become somewhat blighted or run down because people just don't want to go there. So that's that. Market trends. Oh, last one. Can't get behind the driveway widths. I think 25 feet is plenty. I live in a neighborhood that has several, my driveway looks like that. I don't have the rock. I have 3 big boulders on either side of my driveway, so my kids knew not to back into them. And it was successful. I think you can, with a little bit of turning the steering wheel, you'll be just fine. If we're looking at reducing frontages on lots, you know, the most extreme situation to make the point, it probably wouldn't fit. But if you take a 55-foot lot and you put a 35-foot driveway on there, you've got 10 feet on either side. And for those of us who practice space management and snow blowing in the winter, you're out of space. I think that's not going to work. I think staying at 25 is fine. I understand what you're trying to solve. I just want us to come at it a different way. I'm concerned about that much more impervious surface and the lack of stormwater that's addressed. I know you can pick that up in different places, but I just can't get behind that one. So that's where I'm at. I don't know where everybody else is. That's all my comments.
I've got a follow-up comment to that. If, in fact, developers come in and want to build, find that the market supports building bigger houses on bigger lots, there's nothing in these changes that would prevent them from doing so. Is that correct?
That's correct, council member.
Right. So this kind of provides a floor. And if of course, the markets are going to change over time. And, future councils can, of course, tweak the ordinances to fit reality, the reality they see, I think. So I'm in favor of most of these. I appreciate the comments about the driveways, and frankly, I find that driveway look that you have as an example kind of horrifying looking. That's so much cement. Can't we do better than that? But I understand some people have a lot of cars, and so anyway, I do have concerns about allowing wider driveways. So, but other than that, I'd like to commend staff. I know how much work it is. They have gone through to bring these ordinances before us, and we appreciate it.
Thank you, council member.
Well, I appreciate all the comments. And Harley, is that a 25-foot driveway right there? Right? That's not even an example of 35.
It's probably just around 28 to 30.
Okay, so somewhere in the middle.
Each of those panels is 5 feet, give or take.
Yeah, so quite large. This is great, though. I mean, we haven't reviewed these since the 1970s. And with everything that's been coming before us as PUDs, I mean, this helps address the issue of all the questions that developers and property owners have when they're coming for approval for their projects. And I think it'll make development much more straightforward without sacrificing anything real substantial while allowing for a variety of more affordable housing in the city.
Anybody else have anything?
I'd like to add on. I agree. We've had too many PUDs involved that we've had to look at. But I also, maybe it's just old school. I look at Falcon Heights. I look at the College View. I look at River Hills, and those were not that dense. And that's part of what made River Falls River Falls. And I'm just afraid the density in the small lots are gonna change the ambiance and the aesthetics of our city, and it concerns me. So I don't really care for the lot sizes, and I don't, going from 75 down to 5,500, and I don't care for the density numbers either. So, just my opinion.
Can I ask one more quick question? When we say the missing middle, is there a dollar amount kind of attached to that price range of home?
We haven't necessarily done that direct economic analysis, but actually that's a great segue into something I meant to bring up, which is we have done a lot of in-house data scrubbing and analysis recently, and we now have the tools to map on our rentals, our multiplexes, the missing middle, and home age. And I can share that while we haven't done a very deep analysis yet, our cursory review does show that areas with older housing stock and more missing middle housing, really I guess not missing because it's there, with more middle housing actually built, does bring down the median cost of housing both for rentals and for sale homes. I don't have the specific numbers, but if the commission or the council would like it, that's something I could bring to the council at the next meeting.
Well, I think what's always remembered to balance too is that density is attached to dollars.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't keep building $700,000 homes for everybody.
That's right. And everybody doesn't want that.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, anybody else have anything?
Mr. Mayor?
Yep.
I have requested our staff to work on accessory dwelling units, missing middle housing, and updates to our city, such as setbacks, zoning improvements, parking reconfiguration, and planning to meet our missing middle housing goals that specifically meet our city's comprehensive plan in the last couple of years and more. After reviewing the improvements in the packet we are looking at today, these meet the state's municipal league guidelines for the functionality I was trained in, and when I took their classes, I appreciate all the staff and council work specifically recognizing and meeting our community's needs for affordable housing that is functional and built for our community. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, anybody else?
I'm interested in other council members if they're willing to share what their thoughts are on the driveway. I know Ms. Odine and I have kind of expressed some concerns, but it may be helpful to staff if we provide them some guidance before it comes back for the second reading.
Does anybody else have any concerns on?
You don't have to, but I just thought it might be.
I believe that Mr. Morissette's concern is valid, and I think we should have the staff take a look at it and see if we can make it work with the plans that are in front of us. It's the functionality we want to make sure we keep. So.
I was just gonna say, and it was mentioned, stormwater has been mentioned, but I'd be curious to understand the runoff impact, because it sounds, with all the smaller lots, homes closer together, and the driveways, we're changing our runoff situation pretty dramatically.
Another thing that we should think about is the width of replacement. So often on our projects, we don't do assessments, and we're replacing driveway aprons as part of some of our reconstruction projects. One thing to consider, even if the council is interested in allowing people essentially to pave our property, pave the right of way, that you may want to be specific about your policy. We may want to think about the policy for replacement and reconstruction, that we're only going to pay for 24 or 25 feet of the apron, because combined with somebody increasing their apron to 35 feet, that's a significant cost to us if we're going through on a street replacement. I can say our practice right now, I don't believe right now we're doing any discounting or chargebacks to neighbors when we do our street reconstruction project that includes sidewalk, curb and gutter and that, which are few. We don't do a tremendous amount of those, but for example, if somebody had a 35-foot paved driveway on Wasson Lane, and we just completed that project, you'd end up having 35 feet of apron cost instead of 24, 25 feet. So that picture I think is illustrative, but probably not as dramatic as some of the other neighborhoods where you've really got the pinch down between the sidewalk. Essentially there's 6 inches, 12 inches, 18 inches maybe on the other side of that sidewalk panel, that's still in the right of way, and really that's where the width is supposed to be all the way through. And so I'm familiar with some, I believe I've got some neighbors that, have the 24 feet through past the sidewalk panels, and then it's pretty dramatic. It just, the physics, that's how that's how the dimensions work. But that's something to keep in mind too, that any of these changes, that's why we're trying to be thoughtful, and frankly, that's why some of you think these are slow to come. Like, why didn't we have these already? It's because you're trying to think through all the impacts. And so on something like this, my guess is there's Plan Commission is not putting a lot of thought into what the operational maintenance costs are going to be going forward when we do street reconstructions. But yet that is something we as staff are trying to think about, because that's the same with street widths, right? When you allow developers to put a narrow street in, that's going to reduce our ultimate replacement costs, maintenance costs, mill and overlay, crack fill, all that stuff goes down by the square footage. So you've got that kind of the update in the memo, which I think did a good job of saying this was the collection that staff and the Plan Commission thought were there was the most consensus, or has been the most discussion, and maybe the least complicated of all the issues, knowing there's a whole list of other things that either individual plan commissioners, individual council members, developers, staff members have said, hey, we ought to do this, 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 and this too. So you have full control of the dials here on this. These are all policy decisions that the council can make. You also can send things back. So that's a tool we don't use very often here, but the council could say, we like 7 out of these 8 things, but driveways, we just want the Plan Commission to think a little bit more about. And you can send it right back to the Plan Commission and say, with this added feedback from the council and from staff about assessments or whatever, do you want to reconsider your recommendation, or do you still feel strongly? They can send it back to you, and then you can act on it. So that's another tool you have available to yourself to do that. You can even do that, Councilmember Downing. We didn't expect that that's something that you would want to do as a group, but the amenity package thing can also be something that can be sent through any group you want advice from. So if you'd like to have advice from the park board, you can send that back and say, here's the list staff has drafted. What do you think about that? That isn't our normal practice, but it's something that you have the ability to do. Anytime you want different or more advice, you have the ability to ask for it. You just need to ask for it as a group, not individual council members.
Okay. So does anybody have anything else they want to say? Otherwise, we'll move on to consent agenda, which is a resolution approving award for the 2026 through 2028 electric distribution and transmission line clearance tree service contract. And I will take a motion on this.
Mr. Mayor, make a motion, we approve the consent agenda. Sorry, Jeff.
Sorry.
Second.
First and a second, questions or comments? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, next go on, we got some reports. We got the Comptroller's Report first with Diane.
Yes, the Comptroller's Report for January 2026. General fund revenues through the end of January were $2,132,279, or 14.8% of total budgeted revenues for the year. Revenues in January included $1.6 million in general property taxes, $10,120 in zoning fees, and $8,200 in building permits. Expenditures through the end of January were $1,028,048, or 7.1% of total budget expenditures for the year. So as of January 31st, 2026, net revenues over expenditures were $1,104,231.
Thanks. Okay, next move on to Administrator's Report. Scott, if you have anything for us, or if anybody has any questions for Scott?
Based on your conversation here, we will look for a few more. I'll ask staff to look for a few more pictures of driveways. And then we'll also look at the 2018 and 22 housing needs assessment. We won't have any access to the 2026 needs assessment at this point, but there is some indicators of what the middle is. I will tell you, there's varying groups have determined different levels of what they think it is. So some people have used like the 80% median income to the 120. There's other groups I've seen stretch it down to like the 50%. Most people don't go back down into like, I think in ours, the categories are like deep subsidy, shallow subsidy. And so the middle tends to be in that area that's, that includes market, but it usually has something below what the market is. And sometimes I've seen it even, it's a little above the market because the middle, in that case, is more of a talk about preference rather than affordability. So a lot of people want the middle housing for affordability. There are other people who want the middle housing for preference. That's the style they want. So they'll pay market or a little above, because that's an alternate housing style that they're looking for. So if that makes sense. And like the home builders have their definition when they're lobbying for different rules and zoning changes, and different groups like, I can't remember if United Way with their Alice classifications has included that now in theirs, but there's a lot of different groups that have definitions. We'll see if we can find some that are readily available and can be supportive, so you kind of understand what that might be. But part of the reason that it's challenging is it's missing. So best laid plans to change the code, somebody's still got to build it in order to do it. So is there anything else I can get for council for
Anything else?
based on conversations tonight or others?
Okay, move on to, next is, if council has any questions about the EMS fourth quarter report and the 2025 annual report. And the last thing is, I have one thing for good news. Just a reminder that the 2026 State of the City address will be held 3 weeks from today on March 3rd at Tattersall's, beginning at 7:30 a.m. Registration closes in 1 week on February 17th. So if you plan to attend, be sure to register before the deadline. We hope to see you at the event as we use Legos to help tell the story of River Falls growth in 2025. And next, we will recess into closed session per Wisconsin State Statute 19.885, 1E for the following purposes: conducting other specified business, public business, whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session, to wit, discussion and consideration regarding the sale and development of city property in Man Valley Corporate Park.
Mr. Mayor, make a motion, we move into closed session.
Second.
First and second, may I get a roll call, please, Amy?
Bierstead,
Yes.
York,
Yes.
Carroll,
Yes.
Downey,
Yes.
Morset,
Yes.
Odine,
Yes.
Page.
Yes.
Okay, we will proceed to move into closed session.